is a huge part of my life. Because at the end of the day, when you do have adversity, what are you falling back on? You falling back on bad habits? Because at the end of the day, when life is lifing at the time, and you have all these things in place, what are you doing at that moment to stay motivated, to stay going forward, and try to avoid at at every turn to not go backwards? Because at the end of the day, that's even more adversity that you have to have on. But at the end of the day, if you have that discipline and that routine baked into your life, and not saying that won't ever change, because you change as what it looks like for you. So I know what it's like for me.
Tyron, welcome. Appreciate you coming here. Finally get somebody else from Louisiana. So we get we're outnumbering everybody now. So
LSU Tigers are doing pretty good this year, man.
Yeah, they're
about to take over TWS.
I just checked the score right before this, so they're going to the bottom of the 8th. They're up, what was it, 8-5 right now? So.
Yeah, pretty comfortable lead.
I was gonna say, we're gonna have to deal with you guys checking your phones every 2 minutes when this game's going on.
I'll be all right. I'll see the score whenever it's over. But
took my little guy there yesterday night.
Did you? I was there last night as well.
He was 2 years old, and we had the suite access and all that good stuff, man. So that was really good over there with some of those guys at Dundee and et cetera, man. But we had a good time, and then it rained out, so we tried to get out of there at least 20, 30 minutes early. We saw it kept getting delayed, so then at 8 o'clock, it was like, hey, this is a 100% chance.
Yeah.
So at 7:20, we was like, hey, let's get out of here before it gets crazy. And it did. So
yeah. We stuck around hoping. I was hoping it would stay north of us. Tickets right behind home plate, so we're sitting there. I'm like, oh, these are the best tickets I've had. Get to see. Nebraska's football coach was like right there on the side of, a little ways away on the side. And I'm like, but yeah. So anyhow, it happens. So, but so you're from Louisiana. Kind of unpack that. You ended up in Nebraska, land of plenty.
Yeah, man. So from New Orleans, Louisiana, obviously, and grew up a nice, loving family. Played football in high school. There, 1 year in high school. I was getting all of these looks from Division I colleges around the country, and ended up coming out to Nebraska on an official visit, and loved everything about it, the people, the environment, everything. And I knew right then and there that this was the place I wanted to be. On top of that, I was able to see some of my new friends as well that were my former teammates, still my friends these days. Actually, just had a good time with one of my buddies, Reed Carroll from Seward, Nebraska. And just those relationships I was able to make, even just at that moment, not having even played a snap of football in college at this point, and made some lifelong friends. I'm not saying it would be different anywhere else, but yeah, from New Orleans, Louisiana, knew I wanted to come down here. Went to a powerhouse school in high school. We have a 5-part docuseries on Hulu right now for my high school at Nacar. I believe the documentary is called Algiers America, to see how my high school in general was, considered or is considered the best football program in the history of Louisiana, outside of some places like J.T. Curtis and et cetera, right? But my school coaches, we didn't just put out great athletes. We also put out great coaches that went to the next level as well. And some went through the ranks of college, Division I college, all the way down to the NFL. All the way up to the NFL. So, so that's just a little bit of my background. So I came from a place of discipline and football, and not just discipline on the field, but off the field as well. And we took doing your job right the first time extremely serious. And that just kind of stuck with me as a person, right? You kind of build your character with that, build some some resilience, and through adversity. In high school, started there. So obviously came out to Nebraska with the same expectations and routine that as I had in high school. But obviously you're a freshman, you're 17 years old, you're 1,000 miles away from home. It's like, well, we're getting into some trouble just for a little bit, right? So not a ton. We had a lot of good times. And but you learn, you learn and you grow from some of the things that, what are your goals and where you're trying to go and what are you doing to get there? One of my coaches always said, hey, you always talk about trying to go to the NFL, whatever the case is, but you're not working at that level. I'm not saying that you don't have the potential, but you're not working. You're not setting your days up for success to be that. And that's when I really got a glimpse when I got to Nebraska, just what that all meant and what's it mean to show up every single day. Even on the days you don't want to show up, you do it anyway, right? So that was a huge evolution in my life personally. Just to know that, the ceiling that I thought was once, the standard has continued to increase. And I've seen some of the best and some of the best with potential crumble under those circumstances, because they were so used to being here and they didn't want to evolve, and you know what happens when you don't evolve. So, so came here with the same expectations, same routine, discipline, that whole thing, right? So just going back, but now making our way forward, and like I said, just enjoy my every second being here. We weren't the best, right? We had glimpses of being very good, and obviously I'm sure you guys seen the seasons where we were losing by 1 point, 2 points, 3 points. It was like, God damn, man, what are we doing? But eventually throughout that process, man, you can take something with you, and that's what I feel like a lot of us have done. Similar to my buddy Mo, I'm sure his answer would be the same thing, played together and that whole good jazz. And obviously it wasn't what we wanted. We came out here for a reason, and that was to win, and we couldn't make that happen. But like I said, took some lifelong lessons with us.
Do you feel that's helped you? One thing I noticed, people that played high school or college sports and military people seem to do better in business, or not do better, but more the discipline aspect in business. Do you feel like everything you learned in your years at Nebraska playing football there has helped you just stay focused when things get hard in business?
Yeah, I'm not sure if you guys have ever heard the saying where a player doesn't rise to the level doesn't rise to the occasion, but rises to the level of the training, right? That's, that in itself speaks for itself. So to your point, yes, discipline, and hopefully I'm phrasing this right, discipline is a huge part of my life. Because at the end of the day, when you do have adversity, what are you falling back on? You're falling back on bad habits, because at the end of the day, when life is lifing at the time, and you have all these things in place, what are you doing at that moment to stay motivated, to stay going forward, and try to avoid at every turn to not go backwards, because at the end of the day, that's even more adversity that you have to have on. But at the end of the day, if you have that discipline, that routine baked into your life, and not saying that won't ever change, because you change as a person, and some things just don't work, and you have to think about it again and restructure what discipline looks like for you. So I know what it looks like for me waking up in the morning. I know what it looks like when I'm gonna eat breakfast, if I'm eating breakfast. Kind of on a little intermittent fasting thing right now. I know what my son is going to eat for breakfast. I know what his day looks like before I even get him to school. So I would say that it has played a huge role, right? Because I look at adversity and wins and losses and all these things, right? It's waves, and sometimes you have to ride the tide, and sometimes it comes down low, and you just kind of just ride the wave, and eventually you're going to come out of that feeling where you feel that there is some pressure or adversity or something that's keeping you from, feeling confident and going forward. You just fall back on those habits, man, that you've already set, and knowing that within time, like everything, this shall pass,
Yeah, I know. So you talk about discipline growing up and stuff like that. If I'm not mistaken, your mom was principal?
Yeah.
So she pretty...
Yeah, so contrary to that, man, my mom, just like we, man, super focused, disciplined in her own field. And she had me really young. Mom had me at 17. She was still in high school. I have baby pictures of myself and my mom. I was, I don't know, let's call it 3 months old. Mom just graduated high school, and she started off as a substitute teacher. And she went from that to being a teacher, because while she had me, we were living with my grandmother at the time, and which I'm kind of a grandma's boy, not necessarily mama's boy. So, and I think it all started in those early days. And she went to college and did really well. She was always really smart. I have a family full of smart folks, and I feel like I kind of just fell short of that bus. But she did a great job in college, put herself in a position to become an administrator as well, getting some extra credit, I believe, in between them. She went to go get a master's after. And in Louisiana, you have to have a master's degree to be considered an administrator in any capacity, right? Dean, assistant principal, whatever. And then on top of that, she was always working it's to better her craft. Even in the summertime, most folks would leave. Teachers, I'm speaking of, they would leave for the summer. My mom would actually go and get reps as a principal in summer school. And so she would manage, as a principal should, through the entire month of June, I believe halfway through July. And obviously then she'd get a couple weeks break before she starts again. And I think the parish saw a woman that was smart, leader, systems and processes meant a lot to her. And not just that, she kind of trained her folks to manage up. And I think that's kind of like the highlight of our success, just becoming a principal and winning principal of the year. And obviously being elevated from a principal. I didn't even know that was a thing. You can be promoted as a principal. And now she is a leader of 14 to 15, all of the high school principals in the state of Louisiana.
You mentioned it really quickly in passing, but was it 2 years ago she won Principal of the Year in Louisiana?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was a proud moment. I couldn't make it out.
I remember you telling me. That's why I stuck around. I remember how proud you were as a son. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's all she spoke about. And to the earlier point, she, during those times where she was just grinding, and so it wasn't necessarily about me and my little brother and my little sister. She had goals herself, and she always wanted to be a principal, and she made it happen. Wow. And was promoted out of that position of only having it for 4 years. And I was like, wow. So
yeah. I mean, it says a lot going from being pregnant your senior year, having a kid in your senior year, graduating with a kid on your arm, going all the way to be not a principal, but the best principal in whatever year, 2023 or whatever.
Absolutely.
In Louisiana. So it's a long road.
So what did you learn from her as far as, having to overcome that adversity at a young age and learning to rise to the occasion and not fall victim to your circumstances?
So I feel my mom and I kind of fed off of each other for a while in our lives, right? When we've had a lot of tough moments growing up, and losses in the family, and just things that can turn a family upside down pretty quick. And through those times, I looked at sports as like an outlet, and just my determination on and off the field to be a better brother and son. And we have our moments, right, when you're growing up making mistakes, but I try my best every day. So through those moments, my mom would always look at me and say, man, how I want to be more like that. Like, how are you able to stick through these tough times and doesn't seem like it bothers you at all? And maybe it does, and obviously getting some of that stuff out with the therapist now these days. But at the time, that's the only thing I knew, not stopping for any adversity. And my mom fed off of that, and here my mom is, goals are back on track and just crushing it. And I'm like, what are you doing? And I find myself talking to my mom about her leadership and how does she get all of her people to manage up at that point when they were the number one school in the state of Louisiana and all that good stuff. And she had an expectation, right? And I would say that to answer your question, short story long, we just kind of fed off of each other,
Which I think is a form of servant leadership. And looking at your mom as the leader of your family and her still being able to step back and see that you're having successes in this area and trying to understand it so she can apply it elsewhere.
Yeah.
I fully believe that the things that you might have taught her from, adversity in sports led her to become the type of person that becomes principal of the year.
Yeah. But I also think, and even just to add to that, so I don't want to take away from my mom's one. I don't want to undermine what that looked like. She had me, and my biological dad wasn't in my life for those. So my stepdad stepped up and raised me, and that was adversity. And watching my mom go through that, right, and continuing to crush it and continue to just to be focused. Never saw her mad. Never saw her emotional. I mean, you see your mom cry here and there, but nothing like what you would expect. So yeah, I would definitely say that I learned a lot from her in the beginning. So not just the stuff that we went through, but just watching how my mom handled it is I wanted to handle my adversity or handle my situations or problems and even the good times like that. So that was just the start. And I didn't mention that. So I want to make sure I threw that in there.
Absolutely. And I think that it's extremely difficult learning how to be a parent. Like if you look back, like my parents, I mean, it was their first try at being parents. I now can see things that I probably would have done differently, but at 17, you're still learning how to be an adult. And so you're learning to be an adult while also learning to be a parent. And there's a lot of growth that happens during that time. And, me, I was 21 with 5 kids. And so learning how to be an adult while still, learning how to be a parent, it takes a lot of growth and a lot of dedication. And so, I definitely applaud her for doing such a good job at 17. And then you said you have two younger siblings, like to have 3 in your 20s, like that's a stretch.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But it also beats the alternative of having them later. And, because if you have 5 kids at 21, this is the way I'm thinking about it, right? You have 5 kids at 21. By the time you're 42, they're out of the house, man. So
and I get to enjoy a lot more of life with them, rather than
absolutely.
wait until I'm 40s or 50s to start having my first kid. And,
yeah,
I'm very grateful for that.
Then you can't go on the roller coasters with the kids and stuff. And you're like, hey, dad's too old. I'm good. I don't want to do this,
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how did going, through college, playing ball, was there still dreams of going pro, or where did that kind of fizzle into business?
Absolutely. So around my junior year of college, I was really picking up a bug of, what real estate was, right? And I'm gonna just go back and let me know if I get off the rails, but I'm gonna go back.
There's no rails here.
Yeah. So my freshman year, man, I was always focused, like I said before, right? And I would go to these career fairs all the time. And they had specific career fairs only for the athletes on campus. And it would be right there in life skills, man. They have so many resources to take advantage of. And nobody did. And I was like, well, man, I'm a kid from the hood, man. I get to talk to Joey Hausman, Hausman Construction. I get to talk to Bo Jones with True Bill Construction and all these guys doing all this stuff. So my curiosity peaked, and obviously in real estate at that time, which kind of forced me to go into the construction management degree area, right? But I chose to get out of that one because I started talking to these guys who are actual developers in town doing some of the splashiest deals in towns or even the smallest deals in town. It's like, you don't need that, man. You have resources, construction guys around you. You can get your full crash course while doing it. What you should go understand is financing, economics, transactions, how is business done in general, So I was able to get and then on top of that, how do you communicate with people? How do you communicate with a team? How do you help your team manage up, or how do you teach? And all these different things, right? And also how to adapt to people and where they come from, right? Because everybody learns differently. So I would say it started there in school. So I would say fast forwarding my degree. I'm gonna go back. Can you ask that question one more time?
Yeah. So where along the line did the dream shift from wanting to go pro to pursuing real estate?
Absolutely, yeah. So by the time I got to the junior year, I was doing a little bit of wholesaling and all that good stuff down in Lincoln. Going into my senior year, and actually started to make some really good money doing that. and I was playing football, doing my last senior paper, and I was like, well, man, this is pretty cool. I actually can do this stuff. You do your first couple, and then what's the next level after that, right? So during that point, I really knew that there was a life outside of football. I could have went and played for sure. I believe I had the talent. I had the folks around me and the support saying, hey, you can do this. But in my gut, I felt that hanging up the cleats before it was done with me was the best route for myself. On top of that, I knew I could build something in this space, even though I knew it would take a little time. But yeah, I would say my senior year of college, and I was still playing, still out there making tackles, and I knew what I wanted to do when I was done, and that was build a portfolio in the real estate space. So,
did you bought your first one when you were like house hacked or something like that when you were in college, didn't you?
Yeah, it was a small little wholesale flip deal.
That was your first.
Yeah, I've only done one in that space at the time, and like I said, once I did that, I said, commercial looks a little better to me, and I knew the guys in town, and at the time we had not moved to Omaha, and I had resources in Lincoln. I was able to connect them with resources in Omaha, so that whole thing happened. But outside of the flipping that house, I was like, hey, I want to go flip a building or something. I didn't know what the lingo was at the time, and I figured my best way to get in and understand true commercial real estate is work with the guys that's pretty much built half of Omaha. So I became a broker with Colliers International here in Omaha, global commercial real estate firm, similar to your CBREs of the world and your Cushman and Wakefields. And we have a huge presence here in town and great reputation, working with some of the biggest developers, some of the bigger, at least here in Omaha and throughout the Midwest. Working with some of those folks that, you mentioned their name and that's instant credibility. And I wasn't using guys like, Kiewit or, those other folks, but the guys that work with them, I'm able to learn from them every single day. I mean, we got a guy in the office named John Walbaum, been in the industry for 35 years, I believe. And it's the chairman of when it was Grubbs and Ellis. Pacific Realty was Jay Noddle and all those guys, man, doing all this work in Omaha, First National Bank Parks and all that stuff. And just to have those resources, true and near, man, it's super cool.
Do you feel being a former Nebraska football player, just with the state and the way people are so fanatical, does that, you feel like it just gives you like, recognize you from there or whatever? They just know, I mean, it's not like you're a small dude. Like you walk in, it looks like you did something,
Absolutely. So now, man, I'm pretty humble about that,
I'm not, you might be, but just the way they're so fanatical about it, do you think it kind of, just kind of springboards you a little bit?
Yeah, I wouldn't say springboard because, it wasn't like I was in Dominican Sue, where you go anywhere, they know exactly who you are. I think people would just know I play ball just by my appearance.
Yeah.
And they'd be like, hey, you played some kind of ball. What'd you do? And then I would tell them then. But I feel like I don't usually bring it up, especially when I'm meeting people, because I think I've seen that even with the guys that comes and hangs around the facility and the players now, and they're just kind of using who they were as somewhat of like a starting point for who they are now. And it's just, I think, I don't believe that's true at all. Cause like we said in the beginning, like just pre-talking, right? Just kind of, you're always evolving. So I never wanted to use that as a springboard because, there's not a problem with starting on third base, but man, sometimes now I think going into the conversation, I think you'll learn a little bit more about my personality, but I think I just let it flow. I never really force it, but if it was an opportunity there, then yeah, I would take it. If it has something to do with me being a former Husker for sure.
No, I think that's huge because you focus more on building your personal credibility than using that as your,
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because you could have been a former Husker and suck at what you do and it wouldn't get you anywhere. Right. So, I mean, you have to have both, like one doesn't work without the other.
Yeah, absolutely.
For the most part.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. So Becoming a broker, you got licensed out of college or senior year, was it?
Oh yeah. So my senior year, like I said, in college, I was just wholesaling, and I was like, you know what? My partner today, Dylan McCabe, he's a broker over at the Lund Company, and he was a golfer at Nebraska when I was playing football. And my mom, for some reason, said, "Hey, I had just graduated, just done with football. I knew I was doing real estate, just didn't know where I was going to go out. I was, just trying to figure it out, right? Am I going to hang up wholesaling? Am I going to keep it going?" My mom was like, "Hey, have you ever thought about being a broker?" I don't know why, out of nowhere. That's one of her friends is like an agent, and she does some investment sales down in New Orleans area, single families, that kind of stuff, right? And I was like, "No, I haven't." And I started doing my research on it, and this is a week out of college, and immediately I made that decision because I was like, well, one, I can get my broker's license, which I ended up getting my broker's license right out of college. I was like, well, it makes sense, right? Before they changed the rule, and I'm just getting out of class, so wouldn't mind for me to go take another few classes, because at that point I had visions of starting my own brokerage. Because I was like, well, man, then I can have some agents and brokers under me, but I didn't know the system. I didn't know the you can read all these books about the systems, but then until you get into a certain marketplace, you see how things are done for maximum efficiency. I just think what I was thinking was not the right case. But back to Dylan, got my broker's license in March 2020. It took me 3 months to get it with all the classes. I think it was like 8 classes or whatever. And Dylan at the time, we just reconnected again. This is during COVID, the height of COVID, at least. I think we had shut down in March. It was weird. But Dylan was already in the brokerage space. And we just connected, and he came down to Lincoln for lunch. And he's like, "Yeah, man, I'm here doing some work with Edward Jones." I'm like, "Bro, you just graduated with me. How are you doing work with this corporate company?" And he's like, "Yeah, man, I'm over at this place called Cushman & Wakefield in Omaha, one company. And a lot of resources, credibility is there." And I was like, I need to do that. Whatever that looks like, I need to do that, So, and that's where my transition of, the relationships in Lincoln that I met in Lincoln was able to connect with some folks in Omaha. And that's how that brokerage connection started with Colliers. Obviously, have some of the, like I said before, some of the brightest guys in commercial real estate here in our town. So, yep, it all started there.
Yeah. It's, so you started at Colliers, right? So you kind of went
so in Lincoln,
more to the top.
Yeah, so in Lincoln, I was with a brokerage firm for about a month. Like that was, I would say March to April, because then we moved, my ex at the time, we moved in May to come to Omaha because she's from West Omaha, Elkhorn area or whatever. And I've been out here a few times in college. One of my mentors actually lived in Elkhorn, so I was able to get a whole glimpse of that. But yeah, so started with a company called NHS Commercial with Steve Ayers. Those guys are super cool, but just lack the resources needed to make an impact, And I just kind of knew that early. I mean, I see my buddy came over here with Edward Jones, and that's nothing that he did that was special. It was just the people that he worked with. That just, I wouldn't have even, I don't know anybody from Edward Jones and that whole corporate structure, whatever the case is. So that's just kind of where it started there. But then once I saw the lack of resources, I decided to pivot to more of a corporate shop.
And so how did working at the corporate shop lead into the investing? Because obviously people think, I want to get into real estate, I'm going to get my real estate license.
Yeah.
I believe that to be a good investor, you do not need a real estate license. Those are two completely different avenues in the same circle.
Yeah, absolutely. So contrary to what you just said, I believed differently at the time. And I thought, man, I'm going to just go and learn. I'm going to go help my clients put together these deals. And while I'm learning, I'm going to try to make some money through brokerage, right? And which I did and did really well. And so I would say at that time, I wouldn't change anything. I wouldn't get my broker's license just because of where I am now and where you can go with the brokerage side is just a whole nother stream of income, and obviously I got into the space with the goals of building a portfolio, and I didn't want to go right to another house. I haven't done an investment deal since that flip, so I was like, hey, I want to go 0 to 100 really quick. Not in multifamily, whatever, right? Multifamily, we just want to be generalists at the time, which we are now, but we'll get into that. I wanted to go from 0 to $2 million property like that. I didn't, but my book and my ledger didn't allow that. You know, I had some cash, and my partner Dylan had some cash, but then we were just like, you know, shopping around, looking for folks to work with. And one of my president over at Colliers, he always says, hey, man, you have your buckets of clients, right? You have your bucket of guys that you're going to call your guys and that you do deals with all the time. And next thing you know, you become buddies, you take golf trips. And I really took that to heart. And then you have your guys you just do deals with, and you have long-term, however it goes, right? But you just separate them out. And Dylan and I was fortunate enough 3.5, 4 years ago to run into Mike Kuzma over at with KL Capital. He's a partner over at Hills Graven now. And yeah, that was the start of the, okay, how can I make brokerage work within my first goal, which was, I didn't become a broker to be the best broker in town. That's not my goal. My goal was to understand how this worked and see how these brokers also build their own book of business, their own portfolio, and still have that income coming in from the broker side. And once I got a glimpse of what that looked like, I think, and now I feel like we're just starting to get that. We understand what we're doing. And obviously there's going to be some small little nuances along the way, some changes, and right? But we're definitely nimble and adaptable. And I would say that it has been a huge advantage of having my broker's license. Mm-hmm. When I met a guy like Mike, right? He's an attorney. He doesn't have time to look for deals. And my other partner, Scott, he's operations, most smartest, organized guy I know. He doesn't have time to look for deals either, you know? Mm-hmm. And my other partner, John, who's over at Kiewit, handles up project management on some of the build outs and stuff that we do for our tenants, UPS, AT&T, and, 5 points credit bank, all those guys, right? He don't have time to look for deals because he has a full-time job as well. But now we're starting to turn this machine into something where I was able to bring immediate value by just sourcing deals. And I don't think they've had a portfolio before then, but being able to be exposed to myself and Dylan, now we have 2 guys on the team that's doing acquisitions at powerhouses of a shop here in Omaha. I mean, I'm sure you guys heard about those deals where usually when you get a deal, probably 5 or 6 guys have already passed on it. Yeah, we're usually at the top of that list. Mm-hmm. So that was some of the value we were able to bring immediately. And then, started doing some capital raising here and there as well, just understanding the space with Mike, understanding the legalities behind, raising cash on 506Bs and all that good stuff for sophisticated investors. And it was just a crash course that was invaluable. I mean, I could have made $0 and I'd have been like, thank you. Yeah, right. Yeah, I definitely did that.
And that's a good example of where you leveraged your real estate license to give you opportunities and to become an expert in the space. And there's other people like Ryan. I know you got your real estate license. Can you honestly say that getting your real estate license has benefited your investing at all?
No.
Yeah. No. So he made him and I met because I was representing him on buying a property, which is his second or third property at the time. And I mean, I can't honestly say that 90% of the people that I know that are successful in investing got there because of having a real estate license. And most of them, they focused on their highest earning potential, making as much money as they can, and then finding people like us to do the grunt work of finding the deals. Yeah. And so finding the deals that I just need to represent, get a commission, help them make some good money, and then finding ones where I'm like, all right, I'm going to manage this deal and I'm going to raise money for this and bring you in as a partner on it. It's the timing of being able to wear both hats that benefits us. But a lot of people, they think that I want to be successful in real estate, I need to get my license while I'm working my W-2. And I think that if you're going to be a good broker, you need to be solely focused on brokering deals. Yeah. And that is an income stream. But I don't think that it's necessary to be a good investor.
Yeah, absolutely not. And I think we're getting to the point where we're going to continue to grow and scale. And my role is organically, as of even right now, is taken away from the brokerage hours I will put in, right? And that's okay, you know, and because at the end of the day, usually any deal I run across at this point, it goes through my shop, you know.
That's an easy transition because
absolutely.
you're deal finding for others turning into deal finding for yourself. So they're synergistic. It's an easy parallel.
And on top of that, I can still have my corporate backing with Colliers, and they're happy because I'm doing deals, you know. And but on top of that, man, you have, and everyone's going to do these courses and stuff like that online. Dude, the guys I need is right in my office, you know. Those guys know everything, everyone about anything. I would be foolish to leave. Eventually, that might be something to talk about as we continue to grow KL into where we're planning on headed next. But I would say it's definitely helped, man. Helped me understand the space, helped me understand who to talk to, who are real people, who are not real people. A lot of people just talk, you know. And it took me a year and a half or so, 2 years to really sift through that, you know. And along the way, I just think I started putting my own perspective into play. And that's why I would say that it helped me as an investor, right? Because it's just, I mean, it is. It's truly aligned if you wanted to. But if you're a W-2, you have, like you said, you have to learn how to be a broker. You have to know where you're going and what you're doing. Because if not, you're just spinning the wheels. You know, you're not going anywhere. You're like on a treadmill. And then it definitely don't make sense unless you truly are just trying to do your own thing. But I think this only makes sense for me because we have a really good team now. We all have a role to play. Mike, his role is legal. You know, I'm not trying to tell him how to write a purchase agreement, you know, and he's not trying to tell me how to find a deal. We all get paid our fees at the end of the day, you know, broker's fees or his attorney fees. But at the end of the day, when we're putting together something for our fund, you know, for our investors, we want to make sure it's one of the best properties that we can throw into that fund. And on top of that, we get paid for our efforts on that as well with an acquisition fee. So that's where the streams of income come. But at the end of the day, our investors are typically really happy with our performance on some of the assets that we do. So our repositioning.
It's kind of interesting because having an attorney, having a broker, having all these different things, it lowers your overhead, your extra fees. So like, okay, so I pay the broker 2% for this. I pay the attorney $400 an hour for this, you know, and all that stuff. And I got all that in house. Obviously, you're taking fees to manage it all and stuff like that. So it's not like there's nothing being passed on, but you can control that a lot better.
Yeah,
the way you guys have it situated.
Yeah, we definitely control that a lot better because we're all internal, you know, and I think we're priding ourselves on what would you call that? Just having a vertically integrated structure. Yeah. We manage all of our assets as well, but it's all triple net, right? I mean, we have some multifamily stuff here, and you know, and embedded into the portfolios, but not typically where I'm working.
Mostly y'all trying to do triple net.
Yeah, mostly triple net assets because one is safe, man, and how my partner would like to say it, man, we much rather have Jersey Mike's the tenant versus Jersey Mike's employee as a tenant, and that whole thing, right? And you get a tenant with good credit and irreplaceable real estate, man, and irreplaceable areas, man, leasing activity is set. Now, there's a downfall when you put a 10-year lease in place, right? Because unless you add net value, let's say we bought a building like the most recent one we bought was not most recent, maybe 2 transactions ago. We bought a $3.3 million property down in Lincoln on 48th and No. You know, and we've already had a value to that property in less than 6 months, you know, and obviously we was able to get that juice between, you know, our actuals and where our performer was going. So that's the juice that we like. You know, it's not a heavy lift. It's not too much involved. And, you know, if we have the relationships, like I said, in irreplaceable areas, we can get a tenant in there and backfill, you know, 5, 7, 10-year leases. And at that point, we just added all this value. So now we went from 3.35 million in value to close to 4.7 million in value, 4.5, 4 to 7. Let's call it 4 or 6. And now we just let it stew, you know, we're just letting that property stew. And then and managing in-house, we get to see everything that's going on. We're not putting it in the hands of some property manager that's going to charge us 6, 7% to manage a $1 or $3 million building, right? And we can do that all in-house because at the end of the day, it makes it easy because these tenants are responsible for all of it anyway. We might have to put someone in place, But we have systems now internally where if Scott's away, I can definitely step in and go into our I think we're using Notion now and just see where all of our vendors are. And if I have to get someone out because there's a broken door in the back, like, yeah, we can reach out to our vendor, get the door replaced, but then here's the invoice for it. We don't pay for it. We just set it up. And
if I'm brand new to real estate, what is triple net and what is one or two of the benefits of triple net versus multifamily?
Yeah, so triple net itself is pretty much saying that on top of your base lease as a tenant, you're also responsible for your, let's say if it was a single tenant, well, let's talk in terms of a single tenant building. So let's just say we had a building with Starbucks in it, right? So Starbucks will pay us a base there, and usually that number is north of $60 a foot these days. It's pretty crazy. I've heard of some 80s out there, but on top of that $80 a square foot in rent that's coming directly to us, you're going to have, so since they're 100% tenant there, they're the only tenant there, they'd be responsible for 100% of the maintaining the building. So roof, windows, parking lot, whatever, right? Yeah. And on top of that, they're also responsible for taxes for the property and insurance.
And that's the triple net.
That's the triple net side, yep. So maintenance, taxes, insurance. The benefits, I would say, is one, it's mailbox money, right? I mean, especially if you can build these things where we're heading now at KL. If you can build these things, you put a cap rate on it that's so nice if you can build it correctly. That's the benefit, right? You have consistent income, you know what you're getting. And two, you have credit from these tenants and you know that they're, if they went bankrupt, then obviously they have to shut down all their stores. But a lot of these retailers are so strong, they just rather go dark than to shut down a location. Because if they shut down one location because of bankruptcy, now you got thousands of other stores going down, and they don't want that. So the credit worthiness is what we like.
Dark.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So going dark is when a tenant is in a space, right? But they're not physically there. So we have a property in Lincoln, one in Norfolk, actually. We just acquired that one for about $3 million in February. And one of the tenants there, Med Express, it's a $500 billion conglomerate medical clinic ordeal, right? This is definitely like BlackRock kind of size. So these guys, they're huge, they don't care, right? Because if you're looking at these things as a portfolio, for a dark tenant, it makes sense, right? Because your losers are your losers, and you already baked that into your performance before you start buying these things in the first place. And your winners kind of, if you have one at 10x, you have 10 at 10x, and one that went down, they still up huge. So in the dark side, they're like, hey, at this point, we're paying rent, we're taking care of the true expenses for the property, like I said, insurance, taxes, and maintenance. And then they're like, well, let's just call it $150 all in, $150,000 all in, but then they're only attracting $100,000 in income. And that number is way skewed, but you're losing $50,000 a year at that point. Now we could put that in terms of millions, if we want to. And that means a lot to these guys. And even sometimes where they are able to cover their debt, or whatever debt they have, their expenses with us, the rent, the expenses, and they're still up, but then they're not reaching that percentage that they need for growth. So then they will shut the location down. They will just, like I said, so when it's dark, that means when you drive past it, it's always dark, but there's a sign on top of the base.
Still says Walgreens.
It still says Walgreens, yeah.
So they keep paying their rent and their nets every month, but there's no one there.
Yeah.
No one there, yep.
And typically, I'll see these guys that sublease those things, which it's no stress on the landlord. They're like, sublease, I don't care.
Yeah.
Just as long as I'm getting paid.
And to that point, we have a few of those that we're working out now because we do see value in irreplaceable real estate where the owner's kind of tired maybe and they have a dark space so they get the income. But then we're like, well, right now we're doing a deal where we have iMart Express as one of our tenants. And they signed a lease well before we bought the property, but they signed it in 2023, October 2023. They went dark before they even had 12 months in. We bought it in 24. So, but they're at $20 a foot. Let's call it. Doing a deal right now with AT&T, and they're at 29. And this is where it gets tricky, right? Because sometimes it don't make sense because, they always say doing nothing can be a really good thing. We don't have to do anything. We could just take that money because our value add was getting the 20% vacancy filled, and we did that with UPS. So technically, we'll keep that dark space. We don't care, but this is where it gets tricky, right? Because let's say you get a new tenant in, right? That new tenant still needs a standard. We got to deliver that space in white box conditions. So that means whatever was in iMart got to come out, and that's smooth floors, ceiling grids going, just white box, so they can come in at whatever national requirements or criteria they have from their chain of authority, right, on how their store should look. Especially AT&T. When you go into AT&T, it looks exactly the same. If not, they have maybe a branding remodel or something like that. But for the most part, those folks are pretty consistent. But consistency costs money in their space. So even though we have a dark tenant, AT&T can come give us an offer to come into space, and they still require us to put easy numbers, right? They want $20 a square foot, right? Let's just say they're taking over 3,000 square footage of our space. So they want $20 a square foot on 3,000, right? So you do the math on that, probably a little closer to $100-something thousand plus 15 to $20 in TIA. So now we have to make this make sense, right? First off, if we do have this cash, is it worth putting it into the property and getting that rent from AT&T? Yes, it does. It definitely makes sense. But where's the rent at, right? And that's where the rent has to make sense as well for us to put that additional cash. And what's that spread? We're going from 20 to 29. And I think that's where the juice really makes sense. But then you can get to some places where I've heard some stories where, you're going to have to, you're getting a certain amount right now in a dark space. Let's call it $30 a foot, but the market is actually 25. So now you got a tenant that's interested, but you got a dark space. So that means you're going to have to pay all this money. You can do a buyout, right? That's one thing I didn't mention with AT&T. We're going to do a buyout with our current guy, but we want that to wash out whatever our expenses will be with. So whatever our TIA is, tenant improvement allowance, or our landlord work, we want to make sure that the lease that we have remaining on that term, the CAMs and all that stuff, whatever we get, whatever our invoices is for this, to do this deal with AT&T, we want that to wash with the lease that we have. Because if not, then we pretty much, now we have to make sure whatever we have to do come out of pocket for, make sure that makes sense with the rent.
Because otherwise it just makes sense to just leave them in place.
And just let them, and we'll get to it when we have to, right? Because at that point we have great rent coming in. We have the value that we're looking for. And by that time, man, we might even sell as well. People buy dark tenants. But like I said to that other example, you have something at $30 a foot, but the market is actually 25. You still got to spend that money, right? That number ain't changing at all. That money that you have to put into a property because that's what they need to be successful. But then you're doing all that, putting all this money into it, and you're making $5 a foot less. And it's just like, well, God, man, does that make sense?
So obviously it all comes down to how the leases are written. But when you have a tenant that goes dark like that, I mean, the options are you negotiate a buyout, you sublease their space, or you replace them, right? So Absolutely. If you sublease their space, sometimes I've seen where that difference should go to the tenant that's in there because they're technically leasing it to someone below them, which means they're still on the hook for everything for their $20 a square, and they get that $9. So that's where it's more beneficial to work the buyout or replacing the tenant. Yeah. And so, I mean, there's so many different games. And I came up in residential side doing multifamily, and everything multifamily is like a gross lease. Yeah. And so seeing all the different levers you can pull in commercial is just fascinating. Yeah. I mean, there's so many different there. And the biggest thing that I've been told is commercial deals, everything's fair game. Everything's Absolutely. Negotiable. Like, down to, freaking light switches. Like you can
everything, man. And on top of that, you can amortize that stuff, throw interest on the TIA. So if you want $20 a foot, like you want $20 a foot in tenant improvement allowance, let's just call it $100,000. You want that? Well, if we have to go get that money from a bank, how much would it cost us? Mm-hmm. Now, I'm gonna say these days probably 6.5%, 6 3/4. Let's call it 7. Well, if we're going to come out of pocket and do that, we're going to put a 7.5% interest on that $100,000, right? And then we'll just add that to your rent. now we're pretty much getting paid interest every year on the TIA because at the end of the day, I mean, some portions should be free, but most of them are landlord work, right? If a tenant says, "Hey, we need this to be in white box shape and all you need to add this, and I'm like, okay. And when we give you a number, this is what the rent's going to be because we have a calculator that we have all of our costs to do it, and then we would put, all right, what interest would we charge? If a bank was to charge us interest, because if we're getting paid from the bank and we're not passing that on to the tenant, then we're losing.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure that we're at least being compensated because it's technically a loan,
And the biggest thing that I love about commercial is like when you get a residential property, say I get a 50-unit apartment building, and I go and I put $5,000 into every single one of those units, and then I increase the income. Well, I can take a loan out on that increased income.
Mm-hmm.
With commercial, especially triple net commercial, you go get a tenant that puts in a portion of the improvements. You give them a tenant allowance, which you also bill back to them. You can go refinance based on what they're borrowing from you.
Yeah.
So that increased rent rate, whereas it might have been 16, 18 bucks, if it's say 21 bucks a square times 5,000 square feet at a 6 cap, that's 1.75 in value right there.
Yeah.
You might have bought the building for 1.1 and then used, 100,000 of your own money, but you just raised the value of that property significantly.
Absolutely.
So that's part I love about it so much. But
Yep.
anyways.
And then you kind of alluded to this, like that's the upside, but then you put a 10-year lease in, market value could be a lot higher in 10 years and that's kind of the trade-off that you have there.
Yeah.
You take a lot of near-term growth.
Yeah, but we also have in these leases, let's just say, retail is actually doing really well, but we do have rent escalations in there to keep up with inflation. And I believe that number now is like 2.7 to 3% or something like that. So we are getting those rental bumps, right? So let's say we either getting them annually or we'll get them every 5 years, right? So if you're paying $20 a foot today, but in 5 years at 10%, you'd be paying $22 a foot. Mm-hmm. So you just kind of compensate for that. And obviously that $2 a foot on 5,000 square foot, it's an extra $10,000 a year, that makes a huge difference.
And it's security for the landlord and the tenant too. Like,
yeah.
So, I mean, I have some office clients that they locked in their lease, 5 years ago. They had really, good 1.5%, maybe 1% increases. And then they get to the end of it and they're riding pretty. And now their landlord just doubled their rent. Like, well, yeah, because you got to get to market. Like they're so far behind market now that he's like, well, I was paying, $2,500 a month for this space. Now it's like $4,500. Like, well, yeah, it's going to keep going up too. So having that long-term locked in, it's mailbox money, but you got to be really dialed in with your numbers too.
Absolutely.
Because you get that wrong, you're cash flow negative for 10 years.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why we definitely put this in the hands of, most times you probably need an architect before you even touch a space because you're doing something structurally to affect the integrity of the structure of the property, plumbing, mechanical, electrical, whatever. We get those guys involved just so we get an idea. I mean, I'm not an architect, but we know the guys that know what they're doing. And it goes back to one, like what are your core values, right? Just accountability, leadership, and being enterprising, the whole thing, right? But accountability is a huge thing. So we like to make other folks accountable, and obviously in return we pay them for that. So that goes a long way, and we make sure also with our general contractors that those numbers are precise. Because usually you start with, let's just think about this as a dartboard, right? If you're on a dartboard with your number, great, because obviously you don't want to be in the black area, right? You want to be on the dartboard. And as you continue to fine tune your process, you want that dart to be near the middle. Mm-hmm. By the time you start, locking in leases and things like that, because last thing you want, like you said, you don't want to do a deal and next thing you know, the numbers are all wacky because it wasn't the same as before. Good thing construction is kind of stabilized for now. So we know it's not fluctuating up and down unless these tariffs take a toll on us, but I don't want to get into all that stuff.
Yeah. So you mentioned a little bit, y'all trying to get in development. What else is next for you guys? Yeah.
So what's next for KL right now? Let's go back a second. We can buy all these assets, but at the end of the day, we're still asset managers, right? We have to manage the money. We have to manage these build outs, make sure money is going in the right places and make sure we have enough distribution for our investors, right? So that's what we're doing currently. We're just stabilizing at this point, making sure everything is smooth. We already have all the leases we need, 100% across the entire, $10 million portfolio, whatever it is. And now just making sure it's smooth and it's just exactly what we knew it was going to be. But in the meantime, we started a development company last year. And, it takes some time to get into that space, man, especially with construction costs being high and also trying to find ground, that makes sense. And now here it is. Over time, you continue to be consistent with something and just continue to hammer that nail. Something comes up for you. And we have a few things in the pipes now. One piece of ground we're about to close on here pretty soon. In Gretna, I will call it maybe another 2 months or so. When I say pretty soon, because due diligence was pretty long.
Yeah.
6 months or so. And we have a youth sports user down in Gretna that we're going to be building for. New concept out of Miami with all this AI training. Youth sports out here is
that
pretty,
the one down by the YMCA, kind of down that area, general area?
No. This guy's in Gretna. He used to be a soccer coach from Nebraska back in the days. And he has a really solid network of kids and subscription model and all this stuff. Now he's going to just be tying that with a brand out of Miami that's going to provide him with these tools. But neither here nor there. We're starting to really get our footing because we're starting to see that the market is offering more distressed opportunities, I think. More so than just raising cash and going play the long game. We definitely want to have that set, and we have some other opportunities for that as well. But we believe that the opportunity would be to make your own opportunity coming from the ground up and putting those deals together and then being flexible at that point, right? Whether you want to sell it to yourself in a fund or whether you want to sell it off, it's just giving you the ultimate flexibility. And at that point, you can really build your returns into something that you're actually building. So versus going to the market looking for something that was newly built or even an overpriced Class B shopping center, right? Well, let's just go find some ground like we did in Greta. We was able to get it for $4 a foot, which is pretty cool, right next to the new middle school over on 192nd and 185th and Giles. So Class B location nonetheless, but it's still Gretna, Class A, through and through. We're not on 370, and I don't think my guy wants to be on 370 either, man. 370 comes with different prices in retail, man. That's usually owner users, I would say. But being right next to the new middle school, that hasn't even opened. They opened this year, I believe.
Yeah, that's where my two daughters are going to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And I live right down the road as well, or just right down the road from you. And just seeing the area and knowing what's happening, I have a huge $18 million listing right across the streets, 227 acres. We already have a quarter of that under contract, and we're working with the NRD to buy the rest of it. And that's going to be another 300-400 houses maybe, plus another lake and all this other stuff. So
there's so much going on.
Absolutely. So we do see the opportunity to build from the ground up just due to those factors. So if we can build in areas where obviously the median income is pretty good, they have some disposable income, and that the users like the area because we're not trying to select sites for people. But if we do have something in our arsenal, they're like, hey, we like this, and we're able to negotiate a really good deal on it, then it benefits both parties because if we have to overpay for that ground and that somebody has to eat that rent, But yeah, that's why I would say the opportunity is there, man, because man, you just have so much more flexibility versus buying a 7.5 cap Class B property, or just spend the time. And it's a different process, but once you get going, man, you have all these resources, it becomes the easiest thing to do in the world, because you're not just relying on yourself and how you think things should be done. You have to really rely on your resources at that point, the specialists around your team. And that's why I would say we do a really good job at utilizing our engineers over at ENA, our construction partners over at, I don't want to say partners, but construction partners who really just kind of helped us along the way with some tenant build out deals that we've done for some of our other clients for fee-based deals over with Lund Ross and again with the folks at my office teaching me about the process as a developer, because that's obviously, like I said, been my long-term goal since I was at those career fairs, So that's why I think there's levels to this, man. If you can go and buy and build your center, whether it's flex, which is a very popular product type right now. It's been that way for a long time, and I think it's going to continue its trend. but if we can build that for a local user that has great, and obviously it has a great reputation, we can account for that risk into our return. I mean, we can build that at a 10 cap. Flex is not the hardest thing to build. Now it gets down to like, okay, how are we going to deliver this new build? Because we can just throw your building up and put your bathroom in there and say, hey, everything else is you. And we'll keep rent really low, but we still got it at a 10 cap, So now it's like we putting these things together that has the ultimate flexibility. But like we said, it has to make sense. You have to get dialed in on numbers. And if you're not, you can be eating it for a while.
Yeah, it's always interesting, like all the different ways in commercial to do it. Like you talk about building out and stuff like. So you got McDonald's philosophy, 240s built that new McDonald's. McDonald's owns the land, they built it, all that stuff. Then you got Topgolf, they built it, signed themselves a lease, and then they sell it off to recoup their money, and then they go build another Topgolf somewhere else.
Kind of like the Bird method,
Yeah, it's exactly.
But in business.
But they're scaling their business that way instead of tying up their capital. But it's two different philosophies. Like McDonald's is like, we've been around forever, we have the capital, so we'll keep it and take the appreciation from the building.
Absolutely.
And Topgolf is like, we haven't been around forever, we don't own all this stuff, but we want to scale more businesses.
Yeah, and they can't hold on to that cash as much as McDonald's could, right? Yeah. The footprint is just way too big. And I mean, to build a Topgolf, I believe a few years ago was around, $14 to $15 million to just build a facility, which don't seem that bad, No, I'm sorry. I believe it's anywhere between 8 and 10 million to build an actual Topgolf, because it's only really just field and stuff like that, right? Mm-hmm. And I believe the bar area, so it's somewhere hovering around that number. But with a McDonald's, you can just pump those things out. Man, it's only 2,000 square foot, at the most, probably a little bigger, maybe. What do you think? 3,000, 4,000 square foot these days.
Yeah, I mean, I heard someone that said that on average, the McDonald's is like between 900 and 1.5, based on the construction cost to build, not counting land cost.
Yeah, absolutely. So it makes a little bit more sense, probably to especially when a business is exploding as well. You can tie all that stuff up. But I think these days it's more franchisee ran, from my understanding. I don't want to give the wrong information, but I do believe I'm starting to see a lot more restaurant management companies. I believe they trust at least. Buying them. Yeah.
Well, and a lot of the restaurant management companies that I've seen, the owners of the company might own the real estate, but the business itself doesn't. So it's still like, they're like, we're going to have to rent from someone. I'm going to rent for myself. Yeah. Versus like McDonald's Corporation owns the real estate.
That's what I did with the plumbing company. Like I was like, it was a deal because I could buy the real estate and I could control my lease that way. It's a triple net lease, but it's a triple net lease with me. Like I signed both of them, to myself, from myself, Man,
that's the ultimate finesse right there.
Yeah.
Man. You definitely just creating value in all ways possible.
Yeah.
Man.
So the plumbing company creates it, passes it to passive investment, and
all comes to you.
We all grow together. So.
And there's pros and cons to both. I've seen business models that make more sense by just renting space because they don't have to worry about most of it, But in development and acquisitions, how do you avoid the trap of just buy it and the tenants will come? Like, how much market research do you need to know that this is actually a viable product that I can fill quickly?
That's the most scary part, I think. Commercial.
So you meant, let me go back. So you're talking about if we own a building and we have a vacancy in there and we're like, hey, so there's data out there, man, that we use that allows us to understand, well, let's go back. So the biggest thing that tenants love, dude, is traffic, and if you don't have the traffic and you're not, if you have traffic or not, let's call it 180th and Dodge, right? 180th and Pacific. Even though it's not much retail other than like the Good Life and stuff over there, dude, I don't think they ever have a problem staying rented. Because of the amount of traffic. And to our point, like we own 120th and L over there by Sam's Club, the Verizon Wireless and Teriyaki Madness and Buffalo Wings and Rings, all that stuff, right? That traffic on L Street is, I don't want to throw the wrong number there, but it's north of 39,000, 40,000 cars a day, and that's the first thing retailers look at. I believe Starbucks number is a minimum of 36,000. If Starbucks number is 36,000 and you have that traffic, you shouldn't have a problem with getting phone calls. But where it gets a little tricky is if, we're off the main drag, and we have some vacancy, that is a little bit more risk, right? And we try to avoid those because that is replaceable real estate, right? Because even your smallest retailer is going to say, well, we need to be over here. So we want them to, my phone does not stop ringing on the property that we own. I think that's one of the most lucrative properties we bought. And that was in Lincoln on 48th and O. I mean, retail out there is growing. I mean, right across the street from Hy-Vee. You want to be in a route of where people are. So I would say, but on the development side, right, so that's just the acquisition side, right? Just acquiring pre-existing property. So there's risk, but we try to manage that, and we know exactly what we're looking for because what irreplaceable real estate looks like, man. You just do, and at least in retail. But on the development side, what are you developing? We're developing flex, right? They don't need much traffic because that's more of your standard office kind of retail-ish. As long as they can have that flexibility built into their space, that's what all that matters. They don't need 36,000 cars a day, right? But we're building flex space now in Gretna where next to the new middle school, the traffic for that user makes a ton of sense. I mean, middle school kids is something that will work really well for his business model. So he doesn't have to be on 370 to attract whoever. I mean, he can attract those guys next door. So I think, and another way that we mitigate this risk at least is we give ourselves some time, and we don't pride ourselves. Well, we try to pride ourselves on getting deals to the finish line, but a lot of this stuff is spec, man. A lot of this stuff is speculation. You can never be for sure. We're looking at 40th and Dodge, right? And we should hopefully get a purchase agreement out. But factors like this, right? It's a great site. I mean, it's 100,000 cars a day, maybe? I don't know. But there's no left turn into the site. Mm-hmm. Retailers will look at that and have a field day with it. They're like, well, I can't turn left. So you telling me I got to tell my customers to go all the way down the street, make a U-turn, come back in, and then make a right? That's not convenient, So now you got to start looking for morning, afternoon, and kind of even traffic patterns for these users, right? And that's some of the things that we look for as well. But just going back to the point, we try to give ourselves as much time as possible. And, sometimes it just don't work out, and we have to eat that. It sucks for me and my guy, right? Because we spend a lot of time on this stuff and, this is how we feed our families and keep our lights on and those kinds of things. But, on top of that, out of just getting a deal done and being productive is one of the most important things to me, man. Just being productive and making sure we're not just running in place, And so that's how I would say, short story long, how we would try to manage that risk. And most times when we're doing these deals, we want to make sure that we have a lease in place with someone before we close,
I think that part's huge because, look like the 40th and Dodge site. That's one that we actually owned for years, and we were very single point of focus on it. Like, we're putting an apartment building on this, and we had all the plans. We're going through the city, all that stuff. And then when the holding costs got to be too much, we had to let it go. And so that's actually how we started talking was you had the idea of just putting a retail use. And it's a phenomenal location for retail use. We had never once considered it.
Yeah.
Like, maybe talked about it, but never put some serious thought into it. So you saw that site and you found value that no one before you had seen.
That's the most economical part, right? It's already a building on it. I mean, we could tear it down and then have to build another $1 million structure. And then it's like, okay, if we're going to do all of that, we better have some real interest. And we want to be able to, and we have so many resources, like things like we use retail lease track and like I said, these corporate resources, man. And another one is, were we able to get void analysis? Void analysis is where you can look up every retailer in the book, right? And, you can separate them out from coffee shops and smoothies or restaurants, sit down, QSRs, and you can just select whatever ones you want, because if you don't, you start getting car dealerships and stuff like that you don't need.
Daycares.
All kinds of stuff for that site, but you know what that site needs. So then it's like, okay, we need to find users that doesn't have a site within 1, 2, or 3 mile radius, right? So if we typed in coffee or smoothies, we'll get a list of all the coffees and smoothie companies that's in the Omaha market that doesn't have a location within 2 miles from 48th and Dodge. And they just have void. So Smoothie King, void, this void, because they don't have a site. And those are the folks that you should call, but those are the same folks that are just say, hey man, we can't make a left turn. So it's
right. Well, and that's part of the value proposition. I really like what you said about the acquisitions is having a lease signed ahead of time, because you can also take that lease. It's a contingent lease, right? But you take that lease and you bring it to the bank and say, hey, we got this. It's easier to get funded when you already have a guaranteed tenant, And so, but then also,
or just buying it, right? So 50 to know in Lincoln, 48, 50 to know in Lincoln, we bought that at 80% occupancy because we knew we had who we need, and we knew the kind of tenants that we were going to go after. That building never had a problem staying leased, but we bought it 20% vacant, but we bought it on actuals. So, I mean, we were cash flowing, I think it was like only 2.5, 3% just on it being 80% occupied. And everything else is just juice at that point. But that's just, So we didn't need a lease. We knew we was going to get one, but we wasn't going to say, hey, we're not going to close this deal because we don't have a lease. It was like, well, we know we're going to get it. It's just going to take some time.
So buying on the actuals saved you on that one. And,
Absolutely.
And getting pre-lease is what brings you to meet your numbers on the other deals. I think that's phenomenal criteria.
Yeah, because it's a lot of flexibility.
Especially over the last 3 or 4 years in the multifamily space, too many people are listing on pro forma and they're trying to, if you need to use your pro forma to justify a purchase price, then you're going to get burned 9 times out of 10.
Yeah.
It's very rare. Even if the wind's at your back, it's still going to burn you. So
Absolutely.
So we talked about KL. What's next for Tyron? Where you headed? You got a little one running around, keeping you busy?
Yeah, man. I have a 2-year-old, and he's the joy of my life, man. He slowly gave me more purpose, right? So I know your show is Freedom Fighters, right? And I'm sure people, it's kind of like an ideology, right? Like freedom, and people have different words of being free, right? You want to be financially free. You want to be free from, free from depression or free from anxiety or whatever. But I define my freedom as purpose, right? I know when I wake up in the morning what it is that I'm building that's way bigger than me, and for me, that is my freedom, because at that point I make myself accountable for myself, So, and on top of that, now I have a little one, so now I'm accountable for him and showing him the ropes and what dad does when he wakes up in the morning. I still want to take that approach to when I wake up in the morning as if I was nothing against teachers at all, but like imagine I'm waking up and I want to make sure I'm waking up, and if I'm a teacher, I want my son to see me being happy every morning versus being, just tired and just foggy and don't have any vision at all and about where you're going or where your family. So I pride myself on my purpose and, like you said, falling back to the level of your training, right? What we're doing when we're waking up. And that gives me purpose because I think he sees that at a young age, man. He's a smart kid, dude. And man, he's a stud too. He's big, bro. But yeah, that is my next, right? And also next for me, outside of being a great dad and continuing to redefine my purpose as being a great boyfriend and soon to be a great fiance to my girlfriend, this year sometime. So that's a huge goal for me, right? Because I've never been great in relationships, and because I used to always say it's because of who I am as a person, but that's not the case, man. You can always evolve for the right person. If somebody means enough to you, you would change, and change whatever ways you have. And I will say most of it was communication. So next.
Don't you have a degree in communication?
Yeah, absolutely. So now, but it's easier said than done, man, especially because you got to take in all those different factors of like, where somebody's from and how were they raised, because you raised a certain way doesn't mean that your point of view stands taller, or what you say stands taller. And I'm 29 and I'm just starting to figure this out, man. Like first off, how can you grow a team if you can't, how can you grow a team and communicate effectively, have them managing up and all those good things? We're bringing on interns and stuff now. But I can't speak to my girlfriend in a way that she can understand and speak efficiently with me. And we have a productive conversation, without, someone shutting down or going this way or going that way. And I think that's where I had to really take accountability for myself as well. And I think that's definitely one of the most important things to me is making sure that I have, because when I come home from a long day, I want to have peace at home. And I want my son to be peaceful and happy. I want my girlfriend to feel the same way, including myself, so I can get rejuvenated for the next day. So that's next, man. Just taking my family to the next level, because the money and all that stuff, that's going to come, man. I'm not sweating that, dude. But my purpose, and why I do what I do, and making sure that is always top priority. And I'm reading a book called Think Again by Adam Grant. And, such a great book because, we've been taught a lot of different things since we were kids. And whether you guys notice or not, you might have heard something in middle school that's still a belief in your head today.
Not even knowing it.
And don't even know it subconsciously, right? So changing myself as a person and understanding that you don't challenge yourself enough on your beliefs. And I think that's what's kind of created a better environment for communication in my relationships and other things as well. And even in work, and what my peers at Colliers and my partners at KL, I'm bringing who I want to be as a person, and how I want my partners to be. I'm living that. And back to the book, sometimes you have something with your partner and then maybe he believes a certain way, you believe a certain way. And sometimes as men, you can be alphas in a room, dude, and you just, dude, look, this is what I think it is. This is what I believe this is. And then they're like, no, man, I don't. And this whole time I'm just sitting here like, why am I not even listening? Because at this point, I'm just listening to respond versus just.
That's been my biggest thing with this podcast. Like, people have asked me, like, what's your favorite part of being on the podcast? It forces me to listen to you.
Yeah.
Like, if I want to ask you a question, I have to actually listen to what Tyron's saying to be able to ask you a question back. And so that's been.
And you can tell when your mind wanders.
Yeah,
and you just focus on the next question.
Because there's so many times someone talking and you're like not listening. So if you're not actively listening,
but it also makes it a little crazier too, man, because you guys do this all the time, and it's just like, just listen all day.
It does get tiring. Like, by the end of the day, you're like, holy cow.
I think we've found our limits of how many podcasters can squeeze in before he starts to fall asleep. But.
Absolutely.
No, I appreciate it. I don't know if Tanner's got anything. I know we could try to get you out of here, but
absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, for us, faith is a big role in everything that we do. And, one of the things you talked about is finding your purpose and being the father and, significant other and being the best version of that you can be. And if everything else was to come and go away, you still have that. No one can take that from you.
To the level of your training, man.
Yeah. And we talk about that a lot. It's just, I think how important it is, especially for me, is that, you look at my LinkedIn, it's Christian father. You're a Christian husband, father, and that in that order. And that is the things that's most important. And broker, developer, investor, whatever, those things, those are temporary titles that come and go as the seasons change. So.
Absolutely. And honestly, I look at those things as privileges and rewards from God above, and it was a script I read the other day, right? Because we didn't really speak much on fate, and why I have my fate. And Hebrews chapter 11 verse 6 states, "And without faith it is impossible to please God. For whoever would draw near to God must believe that He exists and that He will reward those who seek Him." And that's more like it. But I do live my life in that way. Take my family to church every week. We probably missed twice this year, and this is the most I've been since I was a kid. I grew up in the church, And I do feel like everything I have comes from him. And when I wasn't in his grace, and I was, to your point, right, in this order. And we spoke about that Life Church over on 24th and Centers. I remember there. And, we had a sermon one day, and it's called Christianish by Craig Groeschel. He's one of the most fantastic pastors I've been around. And he just give an example, right? Because everything is about life. And you could just see the order of everything, right? And before, mine was work, happy hour, girlfriend, and I didn't have a kid at the time, but lady at the time, vacation, whatever. And then God wasn't even in that role.
Left.
But I pray every day, and I act like a Christian. And he would call you out about, not call you out, but in his word, if you felt some type of way about it, can change, because you can't say that you have faith and you're doing all this and you're not living according to his word. And I mean, nobody's perfect, you know what I'm saying? But I do implement that into my family, that we do live according to his word, so that we can, after all of this, man, be up there in heaven with him and have eternal life. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's, I've seen you there with your family, obviously.
Oh, yeah, right. You were at the door, man.
Yeah,
that's cool.
But yeah, I like a lot of Craig's messages. We don't go there as much as we used to, but my daughter, talking about she got me the Christian Atheist book. It's very similar to the Christianish. I mean, same as Craig, his same stuff. I think that one's just the older version, and then he came out with Christianish. But it's a really good read.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Well, awesome. Yeah, no, this is great. And I definitely look forward to having you on again. We can see how the journey's going and,
we kind of talked about that before, how you change over time. And
man.
You don't want to be pigeonholed in your answers today, 5 years from now.
Absolutely. And obviously, like I said, my thoughts on coming on the podcast is my first one. So, I mean, I've been reached out to a bunch about these things. And it's like, well, maybe I need to change the way I'm thinking about this, right? Maybe I do have more to share, faith-wise or just work-wise.
I think that's a very good point. That people often underestimate their journey because, hey, you're 29, but you've got 29 years of experience that led you here,
And extremely unique experience, too. Yeah. Is like the journey that you've come on, no one else in the history of existence has come through it. And especially the lessons that you've pulled through it to get to the position you're in now. I mean, that is... Every story is extremely unique, and that's what we love sharing. And the common themes that we're finding is they're grounded by faith. They have adversity, and we talk about military and athletes typically have more discipline in this areas, and it translates better. So we're seeing the patterns of all those principles that lead you to being a better business owner.
Yep, absolutely.
Cool. Well,
I appreciate you, fellas.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Oh,
that was cool.
Laptop didn't die.
Not as bad as you thought, right?
Yeah, man, that was awesome.